All right, Dean.
Okay. I'll let you get back up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, meetings are posted in all the normal posting places.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. We're on to the planning stage here.
Yeah. So, Joanne and Brian, we will turn it over to you guys. Thank you very much for being here.
You guys may want to change your seats.
We'll flip around here so we can reverse this here.
Well, good morning. Thank you for being here on this early morning, but even more so thank you for offering us the opportunity to serve the Merton Community School District by creating and facilitating, working with your community, the next strategic plan for the school district. We are very happy to be honored with that opportunity and responsibility, and we take it very seriously. Isn't Dr. Imes? I know that we didn't get a chance to meet. I'm Joanne Sternke, this is Brian Cammers, and we are with Excel Leadership, and are so happy to be with you today. Nice to meet you, and nice to be with all of you again. And Ron, good to be with you as well.
And you should call her Rebecca.
Thanks for coming. Today we have a very brief agenda because we really want to be able to do is answer your questions, and we've got a few things that we really need your input on, particularly, as we said in number 3 here, obtain board input and strategic planning committee. I'd like to leave this meeting having you really have your stamp on how you want to go about doing that with membership is a piece of that. So we're not going to spend too much on number 1, who we are, but I think the big piece is we want you to leave understanding what we'll be doing in the next months, because it's going to be rapid work, and want to make sure that you're comfortable when we'll be reporting back to you and what it all looks like so that you feel comfortable moving forward. I think we'll try to take questions at the end, but we're a small group, so if you need to ask questions along the way for understanding, please just chime in. But we'll spend time on the strategic planning committee after we talk about it. But the biggest piece is answering your questions. So who we are, and I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail. Brian, you just want to give a quick overview?
Yeah, I'm a registered professional engineer in Wisconsin. Got an MBA from Vanderbilt. I was on the board at Pewaukee for 27 years and served in every role there. Presenter at the state and national level. Ooh, I can't even count how many times we did that for different topics that were really kind of the innovative things that we were doing at Pewaukee. So I've been involved with some strategic planning, business of course, but with Pewaukee, helped Mineral Point. Together we did Sun Prairie, their original one. So that's where my experience comes from doing this sort of work.
I was superintendent in Pewaukee as well as in Cedarburg and Shorewood, and have been strategic planning with districts for many years, but the last 7 years since I retired from Pewaukee, really doing this work around the country.
Retired.
And, I really love strategic planning because I saw firsthand what it did in the school district that I worked in, but more than that, when you get that blueprint of where you're going, I just think for you as a board, it gives you that sense of focus, and it tells your staff and community, this is really what we're focusing on. And with that, I just think you have great clarity in moving forward.
And it also keeps you focused too. You don't do the program du jour that comes up all the time. No, that's not part of our plan. It's interesting, but not part of our plan. It keeps you focused.
I'm not going to talk too much about what we bring, but I really believe that we have experience in working with great communities of differing sizes, certainly one of Merton community size. And we need to be very cognizant of that. One of the words I use a lot is process owner. Who's going to be in charge of this pillar of the plan? And Ron, you've got a lot of them, it may turn out to be. So we just have to keep in mind capacity in a district this size. Having 8 pillars probably isn't going to be realistic given the output of work which needs to be done. So we'd like to just talk through the phases of the process and make sure, and at this point, answer any questions that you have. So as we begin, we are entering this phase of what I would call, and we would like to say, advanced planning and formation. So in the next 2 weeks, we've we've got a lot of formation work to do. Who's going to be on the strategic planning committee? How is that going to charter and function? And we really want to hear from you as well as administration around what does that look like. So once we form that committee, we need to start meeting in November and really just lay that groundwork of the work to be done. I would say if we get at least one meeting in November with that group, we will be in good stead as we move into December. We also, in November, need to do the third bullet here. Review the strategic plan process and environmental scan data. The school report card will be unembargoed, so we can look at the current data. Where are areas of strength and where are areas of opportunity from the administration's lens? And really get a sense of, as we look at the last plan, what's work to be done, what's work that is abandoned, and what is work that needs to really be considered as complete, as any plan like that. We'll also, like I say, do that environmental scan. And when I use that term, what I think of as an environmental scan is, what does the data say? What is the current perception data? What is the current status of the district with that lens? So we'll be taking a look at the data, bringing parcels of it, parses of it to the strategic plan committee. It's not their job to analyze. We could spend years with them analyzing the data, but really giving them a good sense of, hey, this is the current status. When you look at it, what does it say this plan should be focusing on?
And then with the review of stuff, I probably wouldn't use the word abandoned, but there are some things that you actually got done, and now it's part of your DNA, it's institutionalized. You don't need to focus on it because you have a process where it takes care of it. There are things that the work will continue, and then there are things that, that's not as critical anymore. There's other things, and resources are always limited, so you're gonna have to pick and choose the top items that are gonna have the most impact. So there's gonna be some hierarchy there when you look at some of those things to figure out what's going forward, what's institutionalized, which should be celebrated. You got it done, and what other new things are going to be on there.
So the three big areas that we need to have done by the beginning of December, I would say, is get our strategic planning committee formed, conduct that environmental scan, look at the data, and really do an analysis of the current strategic plan, what, as you said, is operationalized, what needs to continue. And like I say, aiming for December that way. Phase 2 of the planning process is, I just say this is when we are a vessel and we are getting filled with input. The second phase of the process is just that, attain community input. And I really want to be very clear about this because I think it's an important piece of what you need to be able to tell your community. There are 2 vibrant opportunities for your community to participate in this process of attaining input. One, they can come to a visioning session, and we'll talk about that, or they can take a survey, so that every person on staff, every person in the community, family, whatever, who wants to attend, can do one of those 2 things. And so it's not like the strategic planning committee is doing all the work. We're hoping to get hundreds of voices as part of that process, and then the strategic planning committee identifies, working with us, those key themes moving forward. So we'll hold those visioning sessions to really get that voice. And I know sometimes people say students are a great source, even your primary students. If you ask them what they like about school, they will, invariably tell you. And if sometimes when you say, what would you like to see improved in your school day? They might focus on something that won't be a part of the strategic plan. Like, I wish recess were longer. Well, that's not something we'll put in the plan. But it's amazing, by asking good questions, students can really give you some good information that will validate how important workforce retention is and some other things as well. They may not use that language, but they'll be certain to tell you that. We also want to make sure we have the voice of all staff, both teachers and non-teaching professionals, as well as administrators, as well as community members, family, etc. The area that I know we will need help in is identifying community members, people without children in our schools, as well as civic leaders, business leaders, anyone in the community who you might like to invite to some sessions there. I just wanted to show you, this is just a table that we put together to show you the multiple sessions. I think in a district this size, if we look at staff, starting on the left-hand column, I think if we offer, and again, I want to trust your judgment, but I think if we offer 2 opportunities in each school, we probably would be okay. They might you might say, Joanne, they're not going to come at 7:15. Why don't we do 2 after school? And so the times we can change, and I can use your judgment on that. For parents and family and caregivers, I think we probably want to look at, again, maybe before school, and then an evening and or Saturday in each of the schools. And what I have found to be helpful is hold them in the school. It's not like we do them all here so that everyone comes here. If we go to the primary school, it might be beneficial as we look at doing that.
Any thoughts about doing a Saturday for the parents? Saturday morning?
I think it just probably is good chances in the evenings.
Okay.
People's work and kids' schedules, so.
Kids' schedules.
Probably, yeah, it might be Saturdays.
Saturday mornings are busy for families. Could be, it's an opportunity.
We did think about holding a bunch of sessions in one day to get all the information as quickly as possible so that we can start analyzing it. So we could have parents, students, staff, and kind of go through the day and then make a second or third opportunity for those people that were unable to make it on that day.
I would just say, I think it's important that those dates get set and communicated so people can plan accordingly.
Broadcast, yeah, definitely broadcast.
As I look at it, I want to avoid, winter break, but I'm thinking around the first week of December might be a good time to do a large portion of them before we enter into concerts. I looked at your calendar. When we get into the teens, then things are getting pretty busy. So that might be a sweet spot window for us to work at. Students, Ron, I'll work with you and then in turn with your principals. I think if we have roughly 15 students selected randomly at each school, we get a voice, and whenever that might be workable, we could bring pizza and have lunch and really get their thoughts that
Because
way.
we will have student perception data
Yep.
across grades 4 through 8 as well through school perception.
That's great.
And then that'll be more than just I like Jim and I like
Correct, yeah, it's about how they feel.
Yeah.
As we look at the next column on community, sometimes, and again, it depends on if you think there'll be a large group, and when I think of community, this is one you may need to seed. Some places enjoy doing this with families as well, so that it could be families and community members, but we could also hold some sessions for community separate. Again, when I think of that, I think of 3 key constituents: people without children in the schools, some civic leaders, business leaders, anything like that. And by the way, if the group has 8 people in it, that's fine. It's not like we're looking for 30, 40, 50 people in the community group. Sometimes that is one where early morning is very popular, and we try to team it before people go to work. And then we'll do administrators, and also we'll do a focus group with you as well, so that I think we've been. So let me just stop for a moment. Have we missed any constituent group that you feel is important?
Just to clarify, you are talking about, Joanne, having different sessions
Yes.
for different audiences.
Correct.
Instead of mixing them,
Yes.
you would attend the session that you are in the category of.
Yep.
Correct. I think people feel, what I have noticed over time is, for example, if you have staff and families together, families at times don't speak if their child's teacher is in the room and they want to offer opportunities for improvement. It's just better to do them separate. And again, what I tried to say is they're roughly 60 to 90 minutes. Staff often we can do right after school or before school, and it seems to work better that way. But to that point, Ron, if we just put something on the website about particularly the community session, you may not have great attendance. That's one where we need your help to identify people and say, this is a great, and I've got copy that you can use to put in an email to say to people, hey, this is a great opportunity to have your voice heard. Families will normally come, some staff, not all will come. But again, your families and your staff will also have the opportunity to take a survey as well.
Your current communication paths like emails or maybe classroom newsletters and stuff like that is a perfect way to do that.
Yeah, and we'll reach out to the village, and they have a whole different opportunities, and we
Great.
can talk to other things.
Great, I appreciate the dialogue, so anything that you can do that way. I was thinking as we were planning that when we think about a strategic plan survey, I was thinking that a very good time to do that would be right as people come back from in January, that we would deploy a strategic plan survey for no more than 2 weeks. It's a pretty tight window. If people are going to take it, they'll take it rather quickly. We don't need to have it open for 6 weeks. But
Do you
again,
have something you've used before for any of that community input?
We just collected and we'll have finalized this week, actually today's our last day as our school perceptions family survey. So we will have, and again, the team can take a look at it and see what else they would possibly like to ask, but we will have school perceptions data
Great.
focused around community, students, and then we'll also have our staff as well.
terrific.
Do we know what our handles on that? It seems
So
like
far,
we've
we're
got good.
almost 400, so.
That's great. And I would anticipate, as Brian and I plan that, and I want to be very clear, I'm not a statistician by birth or education. I would anticipate that we would put this out using SurveyMonkey or a rather informal tool. I think it's important that people know it's anonymous, but I don't know, and this is something I'll talk about with you, if you want to invest in having it to be sure that only, that you have one code and you are only going to take it once. I've never really known people to want to, in this situation, take the survey 20 times so they can skew the data. But it's something that we'll talk about with you to make sure that you feel comfortable, because it's not like we're promoting with school perceptions a tool to do this. We'll just do it on a very limited platform and deploy it to your email list and the like. So then we'll review the data and identify key themes that we'll bring back.
The thing is, we're not going to count words or anything like that, right? We're looking for general things, because nobody's going to say it the same way. We're trying to collect or pull out of it is general views of certain areas. People won't always articulate it in the same way, but our function is to distill that down, become the key themes of what people are most concerned about, where they see the greatest opportunities.
So as we think about this, we'll be giving you, and Ron, I'll work with you, a copy for the newsletter and for your website to just make sure that we announce the process. To your point, we've got to get those dates going and get that percolating. We wanted to make sure that we could talk with you first about the membership. We'll get the copy for the visioning session. We'll have multiple community visioning sessions. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the language, when we use SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, not only for the district, but for the key areas of the last plan. So when we think of what works well, one of the arms of the last plan was teaching and learning. When you think of, well, you'd ask the question of families, when you think about what your child is learning, how they're learning, what are you proud of? What are you satisfied with? What's working well? And then what might be opportunities for improvement? So we start at the 10,000 foot level. What's working well in the district? What are opportunities? But then we'll drill into, when you think of retaining staff, why do staff stay here? Why do you stay here? Why would you leave? And try to dig in on those key areas of the plan as we do a SWOT analysis. I find that if you dig in on the potential pillar areas, you just get really good glimmers of what might be action plans versus than just staying in the general strengths and opportunities. So I think that's an important piece when we talk about that.
There may be things you're doing that aren't as effective as you'd hoped. And you get opportunities for creating another program, another opportunity to improve that relationship. So it's one of those weeding out things. It's kind of a reflection of what you're doing and how successful it is for, in your example, teacher retention, which is really critical nowadays, I think.
And so as we look at this time frame, that work will continue into January, and then we begin phase 3, which is where we're going to work with the strategic planning committee to really begin drafting. We'll bring those key themes from the survey, as well as they've seen the data now, so what they'll be craving is, okay, show us that sense of now, what are people saying? What's the pulse? And so we'll share that qualitatively, key themes, and then we'll hold that time with them. I want to take a moment and talk about mission, vision, and values. In your last plan, you crafted mission, vision, and values. I like to use the word that we'll refresh and reground in that. I don't think it's beneficial for you to take it back to square one and say, okay, we're going to really change everything in that. But I think what we might do is ask people, when you look at the current mission, what are the 2 words that resonate with you the most? What are the words that really pull at your heartstrings? or you think really are the ones that we need to be focusing on. So we'll talk more about, I would use the word tweaking and branding what we have versus taking it back to square one. I noticed in my work in this area, when you open up, I'll say, core values for discussion, you could end up with 80 of them. And really there isn't a great consensus around them. So I think it might be, these are the core values you identified last time. Are there any that you believe are not relevant, or are there any that you might add? And let's talk no more than one or two. I think we have to put some constraints on that, or the whole month of December might be used just simply on that. And the whole idea of this was to, again, refresh, not reinvent, as we look at mission, vision, and values. We're really trying to get to the core work of the plan.
You go back one?
Sure.
I know that's challenging, but one of the things we thought about is when we're finished at this point, maybe the whole board would like an update of what we've collected, what the themes are and stuff like that, before we go on to that step 3. Usually it's a good touch point, and we can let you know what work's been done, what we've been hearing, before we start digging into actually crafting it. So I assume that's reasonable for you guys? Okay.
Great idea, thank you.
So as we look at crafting the plan, we'll work with that strategic planning committee to really make sure that we finalize that mission, vision, and values, identify the strategic plan pillars and pillar goals, supporting objectives, and then we'll do some validation with administrators. And let me show you why. This is a little bit hard to read, but let me give you I just wanted to give you the language of this. To just show you, this is the language that we'll use. And by the way, we're open if you like different words. Thanks. But I just wanted to show you, I'm going to use the word the cascade of this when we talk about it. So at the top, and again, this is just a sample plan that I'm just using it, and I'm going to be very honest, this might be too big, right? But let me just show you and tell you, this is, the school district is not the important part. I just wanted to use to show the vocabulary. So this is one pillar. This is the students pillar of a school district strategic plan. They may have a workforce pillar, an operations pillar, but I wanted to show you. Your plan is first built on pillars. The current one that you have has 4. We very likely could have 4 again, and in all honesty, they could be very similar. They are very common, and they're very good in terms of trying to get the breadth of what are the 4 big rocks, the big areas. I want to caution you on one thing regarding pillars. I don't think your district is big enough to have 5 or 6. I would say that 4, 3, 4, maybe 5 tops in terms of pillars as we look at it. And it just really has to do with workforce capacity, who's executing that work. Because someone in the district is going to own that pillar. That doesn't mean that person is going to do all the work and be the sole owner of it, but they are the organizer of the work below. And you have to keep that in mind. The second thing that you create after a pillar is, so in 3 years, what's the goal? Or what is the aspiration that we have in that pillar? In this one, all students are safe, known, and valued. So what's that aspiration? And so your strategic planning committee will work to find those goals. You will notice in this plan, and this is where I think it gets, I don't want to use the word bloated, but underneath there are 4 strategic objectives: safety and security, student social emotional well-being, student attendance, student voice and value. Those are what you call the objectives. Those are going to last for 3 years. So if you pick a strategic objective of safety, you are going to work on it for the duration of the plan. So it needs to be big work, right? It needs to be big work. However, you'll notice that underneath each of those areas, there are bullets. That would be the annual action plan work each year that is done. When we get to that level, I'm just going to be candid, administration needs to weigh in because they're going to be doing that work. I think your strategic planning committee can get it to that big point, but when we get down to the point of what are we going to do in the 24-25 school year, we need to weigh in and have the people that are going to do the work have a stronger voice in that. And then down below you see performance indicators. And those are the measures that we use. And again, I want to be very clear. There are more than 3 on this and cut off. But you do not want 2 measures for student safety, 2 measures for social and emotional well, 2 for attendance. You need to think holistically about those measures. That creates then a dashboard that you would see on an annual basis. And it probably pulls data from what is key for us to look at from your school perception student information. So what is key for us to look at in terms of student learning and growth? What is key for us to look at? And you will end up with a dashboard of a certain number of measures. But again, I want to be very clear that you just do the math. If this is 1 pillar of 4 with 3 or 4, if you have measures for every little piece, you will end up with 100 measures, and then you're measuring more than you have the capacity to. So I would.
You end up becoming paralyzed by all the information you're collecting.
Let
And you're not saying we're not gonna be accountable, or there's not gonna be accountability here, but you gotta pick the high hitters. You gotta pick the real winners to measure, because again, you got limited resources, limited amount of things you can measure, and there are gonna be only a handful that are really gonna be critical to accomplishing the work. So it's not measure everything, but measure those things that have the biggest impact.
So, and I'm just going to use the measure that's there.
That's right.
That's your question. You know, like the one that says 90% of students report they feel safe, included, and welcomed at school. I mean, we would use a piece from school perceptions. 90 isn't a magic number. We would look at increasing what you have in your, so it could be 65, it could be 80. It's not as if, there are some where there are national norms that we can compare to, but we'll use your current performance to guide some of those indicators and not make it 100% feel this, 100% feel that, 100%. That's the aspiration, but in reality, we're trying to make incremental growth over the 3 years. So let me stop and answer questions about this format.
Looking at the timeline, what month or where do you see us being on a calendar at this point, ideally?
I would say that we'll start that work in January, and February and March is the big work that we will do in this area. That's okay. That's the big part of the work.
Okay.
And it could, I'm gonna be honest, it could go into April. That's when the strategic planning committee, and then like I say, then we also need to meet with the people internally that are going to be carrying out that work to really set some of those measures. And I just want to tell you, and again, I want to, as we will do our very best to work with your team to set the best measure possible, and you may still have to calibrate it after year 1. It just, measures are one of those things that, and it doesn't mean that you've reached it or not reached it. It just means that we used the best information we had at the beginning, but it just wasn't a strong measure. Every year in Pewaukee, we adjusted our measures. And I think sometimes the community may feel, well, you just adjusted it because you didn't reach it. And the answer to that, that could be true. We set the bar too high, but we're gonna try and do it as exactly as we can.
Or the bar too high for the time period allowed, that kind of thing. So basically the survey and all the visioning stuff, we're gonna get done in January so that we can get on this rest of this work.
So are you suggesting that, so this is gonna be a 5-year plan, right? So each
3
year.
years, isn't it?
I would say 5.
5? I'm sorry.
Okay, so each year, are you suggesting has a target?
Well,
So, because I'm going back to your saying, well, we adjusted it yearly, it's kind of like, well, but if we're, and I understand the need to come back to a plan and adjust with the data that you've got, but like after year 1, hypothetical, you're at 67%, well, we want to be at 71% after year 1, 75% year 2. Well, wouldn't you set it up that way with your incremental? Or
what
are
I
you
think works
suggesting
best
that maybe
is
that?
if you talk about raising 1 or 2% each year so that it lives on, to your point, as opposed to setting a numeric that we're starting at 67 and aiming to go up every year by 2, or whatever that number is. But what I'm going to say is that possibly, and I'll just use this as an example, 3 years in you don't use measures of academic progress anymore, or iReady, then we'll change what it is because you're not using that tool anymore. Or the question that you were looking at isn't getting at engagement the way you want it. I don't think it's about changing the calibration necessarily of the measure if we write it well, that we're trying to make incremental
Yeah, I'm just trying to
progress.
understand, because if this is a multi-year plan,
Yes,
I think it's inherent in the plan that it's incremental steps.
I agree wholeheartedly. I agree wholeheartedly. But that's the difference between growth and achievement. I mean, our hope is that you attain growth every year, But if we say we're gonna make 4 steps in year 1 and we only make 2,
Right.
you know, it's then, what do? We're trying to make 2 then the next year, or are we trying to make it up? Those are those conversations we just have to have. But I agree with you that it should be, and that's the way I tried to write them, is that we're trying to see, you know, whether it's 1% growth each year over the 5 years duration of the plan.
And the annual reviews too are also for adjustment too. We thought we'd use this strategy, would get us further. It's not working. We still have the goal. We gotta come up with a new strategy to get there. So that's what the annual reviews will relate to, the actions that are happening, the results that are happening, and what your target is.
So in May, we will work, and then in June, we want, I would say end of May and June, you receive the final draft, and then in July, we start really crafting and making sure that those action plans are set and ready to go in the schools, so that as the next school year starts and any summer retreat work with the administrative team occurs, that plan is ready to go.
It's kind of a signal of communication where the plan on a page, things of that nature, to really communicate it to everybody, so even the lunch lady can articulate some of the ideas that are in that strategic plan.
And I always like to just be clear, we're not graphic artists. You know, you're going to get this primarily in Word docs. You need to make it beautiful and pretty with photos and the like, but we'll give you the core of the document to work from. And any copy that would be part of a launch of it that you can work. And then, Ron, I'll work with you on implementation of that plan. So let me stop and let's see what questions you have about the phases. So we're aiming to have this board approved end of May or in June of 2024. And the schedule is good for us to meet that. I'm not at all concerned as we move forward with that.
What does April consist of?
April to me is that buffer of making sure that we get the plan so that it's all the way to this level. You know, April is the key work on, I would say, digging in even more at the annual piece. So, there are a few things that we need to talk about as we move forward, and then make sure that we answer any questions you have. And when we spoke with you earlier, we proposed a makeup of the Strategic Planning Committee in around this. And I'd like to hear from you, and I think this should really be something we look at. Do we want more people? You know, and again, I want to reiterate, this is the people that are going to be crafting the work, but everyone has two opportunities to participate in a survey or in a visioning session. And again, I guess the question that I'm asking is the number good, and do we want more? You know, what do we want in terms of this membership, and then how do we want to move forward? I would say in the next week or so to begin making those overtures. So I'm going to sit down and take some notes. Brian, you want to facilitate this work? How are you feeling about this number and where we're at, and where would you like to see changes to that?
You first talked about like 40-some people on that committee, but I think that was a reflection of the last go-around. You didn't have a lot of opportunities for input. And here we have, like Brian said, 2 opportunities for input. We're trying to create a balanced situation here. So we have 6 people, if you will, from the community, 2 board members are from the community too. So we're trying to create balance with internal and external. We're trying to have representation from each school as well. And the board members are there as important to be involved with this as it is later going to have to approve it. So this is a pretty manageable number for us. 40, we had some big concerns to try to manage as a group. But in this case, we've got, what did it come to, 8, 10, 14 people. That's a pretty manageable group, but we didn't know how you would feel about the number in that.
The other thing I just want to alert you to is I anticipate that this group will meet, as it says, 1 to 2 meetings per month for about 6 months. I mean, this is a hefty commitment as we look at it. So I don't think it's for everyone as you think about it. And it's best if there is that long-standing commitment from now until, I would say April as we move forward, and then they'll present the plan in May. They'll help present the plan.
weren't worried about board members, you guys are already committed. You got a lot of nights away. It's the community members and parents and stuff like that. You can always have a little influence on administrators and staff.
So do you have thoughts on that? Are you feeling like you'd like more representation? Just would like to, I'd like this to be your decision. We'll work with whatever group size you want, but I think you need to feel you know your community better than we do, so please make sure you feel comfortable, because then the next question is, how do we identify these people? And again, you know better than I.
And the balance, we try to have just about
50-50.
50-50 with in and out, internal people and external.
I think our larger number before was that's how people had input, I think we've identified that. And that if there's other opportunities for people to have input, from my world, more than 15 people is too difficult to actually have the kind of coordinated conversation you need to have to move it forward. So I'm comfortable with this number.
Thanks, Rebecca.
How are they,
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
How are the parents, community members selected? Staff?
We're hoping you'd help us with that.
That's the next part of the conversation.
Okay.
The last time we had a larger group because the team broke up into each of the 4 pillars. So each pillar had representation of 8 abounds.
And it was just a focus.
Yep, so in this, all 15, however many we have, all of them will be involved in each pillar, because we will dissect each pillar in the team. Okay. Yep.
Comments?
Troy, any
This is a board
questions?
this is a board meeting. So.
Troy, questions, Dean?
That's Andrew.
Andrew, sorry?
Troy was unable to.
Troy's not here. Andrew, sorry, memorized the name wrong.
I mean, I struggle with, we've got, I don't know, how many families do we have? 450, 500
We have
families?
about 625.
And we're gonna pick 4? I struggle with that. I recognize that there are other ways for people to participate. I get that. I just struggle with 2 from each school, and the primary school is weighted heavy year, meaning we have about 550, 600 students over there, so probably more families over there than we do here at the intermediate. We've got 110-ish staff, ballpark, my opinion is every board member should own this, not just 2.
Well, you will eventually, because you have to bless the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, on the strategic plan committee, everybody should own it. That's my opinion.
So.
But I have just one voice again, so.
I do agree with Rebecca's point that once you get too large of a group, it is impossible to have a constructive conversation or make progress. Little bit of devil's advocate is how does it work getting, okay, so for parents, how do we know what parents are even interested or willing to take on that time commitment?
That would be the second part of the conversation.
I think we have to let people know that there's an opportunity.
I want to know what the committee is.
Right.
That's the tricky part,
Yeah.
because there might be a lot of people
Because
say
that's
they're
gonna,
interested,
I
but
think that's gonna narrow your pool right there.
it will. Two meetings a month for 6 months, there'll be a lot.
At
of
an
people.
hour and a half apiece.
Yeah.
I recognize that, but there's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions on the internet.
Sure.
And this would be a great opportunity for those people to finally step up in person and actually provide the feedback and do the work. And I don't know how you communicate, maybe that's the communication of saying, hey, all you folks that have an opinion, have a negative opinion on things, this is your opportunity to have a positive impact on your school and engage with your school, engage with other family members, engage with staff, engage with the board rather than just be on the internet and participate.
So you're looking at balance.
But I understand.
But it's so much easier on the internet.
So we're
That is a
looking at-
communication strategy you're talking about, but still, if you get a whole bunch of people that respond to it, you still gotta figure out what you're gonna pare the number down to.
Well, and we're looking to balance two things, right? Community input and wanting to have that, and the ability to have a work group that can do the work. And research generally says beyond 15, that isn't impossible, but it does get a lot more difficult. So I'm wondering, Amber, if there's, we could ask if there are other models that you've engaged where this is your group and you get this input now. Is there another opportunity later on for some in-process feedback so that you try to get to how can we meet both needs? So is there, if it turns out we start this and it seems like it's not sufficient input as leaders of the process, is that something that you would brainstorm with us to how do we best meet the needs of the community going forward?
I think we have an opportunity to, when we get some of the themes and things like that, that might help direct an idea of who to invite, at that, this after second phase is done. There are other balances you can have. You can have it more weighted towards admin and staff, or you could have it more towards parents. You could take it down to one administrator and, 2 staff, and then put more people on there from the community if that works better. You can add more people, but you're right about the,
So even though we want a lot of community voices, I'm very, very to not weight the voices of the people who did work, right? The people who this is their,
they're gonna have to live with it, yeah.
and it's their profession, right? So this is their background. So there is you're also weighting between, I don't like objective A, and I want to come and tell you I don't like objective A, and I have professional background and knowledge and experience in teaching children, and this is why I suggest that. So
Look, I recognize I said all what I said, and I also understand the harsh reality of when we do give parents an opportunity to participate, whether it's in reviewing curriculum, we get a handful. Whether it's coming to board meetings, we get Justin and another couple people, but mostly just Justin. So, I say all that, I think we should just be open in case this is one of those items that people might actually want to do. But I also recognize that history would tell us the amount of participation, unfortunately, is minimal.
We certainly, I think in answer to what I'm hearing, what I might recommend is we certainly could add another family, another parent representative and another staff representative. That wouldn't weight it, I think 15 is optimal, but if we get, 20 becomes, I think, a little bit more difficult after that. But we certainly could do that. I would personally not recommend that every board member be on the team. I think that oftentimes people will then assume you know more or you are directing it in a way that may not be productive. But in answer to your question, I've done 2 things that you might want to consider to, again, get more voices. And that would be around that April or May time when we've got a draft, that we could do a community meeting before a board meeting and have people come and say, oh, I like this strategy area, but ooh, it doesn't seem like you're hitting the mark with this. And we could then take that feedback back to the committee, so that people have that opportunity for a soft opportunity. I've done that by a survey and I've done it in person. And that's another opportunity for citizen involvement that you may want to consider at that point in time. But again, I want you to feel comfortable with the makeup of this committee, size-wise, and then we'll talk about how we'll select. If you would like to see, a few more in the way of staff and, parents, we could certainly go to 6, and would go that way. I mean, that's not a problem at all.
And the other thing is we could go out with a plan with 14 like we have here, and if we do just get buried with requests, we'll adjust that.
I'm refraining, thank you.
I'm going to go back to what I think is going to be important, what Nicole
Yes.
mentioned before, was these frequent updates. And I look at this possibly as an opportunity like a committee. Our last policy and personnel committee, there was a very specific question that the committee needed more feedback on from the board. So we brought it to the entire board to say, hey, help guide us this way. I think those frequent updates are going to be critical as an opportunity, possibly if in fact we do go the direction of 2 board members, where there still is that opportunity to have, you know, the share out, the information sharing, but also the, hey, we need some help. We're really struggling with 2 or 3 key topics. Whether that happens in a community forum, whether that happens at the board, I think we can continue to gather some more voices as the team looks at it, says we need more feedback.
Can that work both ways with, and Joanne, you might not be a fan of this, but let's say we get to the pillar point, and do we hold a community forum where we say, okay, this is where we're at, giving people yet another opportunity, and then the group breaks out again and says, okay, this is what we heard, or sounds like we're on the right track, didn't hear a lot of concern. Is that another way, or is that detrimental to the work that got us thus far?
I would call that, and what you're talking about, what Joanne's talking about, the straw man, right? You've got it put together, now you're gonna do a kind of a reality check. Whether you do this board meeting, a survey, or, you know, a Saturday morning type of feedback thing, it's all kind of really just kind of introducing it, looking at the reaction and adjusting as needed. So, however you want to do that.
I like the word you used earlier, you know, take the pulse.
Yeah.
See, like,
Ron,
and maybe that's a terrible idea.
are these committee meetings gonna be videotaped?
If they will be videotaped, correct. Because
There's no process, and people can also.
there'll be a process from that standpoint. If it's a committee of the board in which the board is this committee is recommending information to the board, it will be a committee, and per our policies, they will be recorded.
So that's, Andrew, I presume you're speaking to then, people do have the opportunity to see the process, should they choose.
All right.
You're not talking about the visionings. Visioning is not going to be recorded, but the meetings of this committee will.
Yeah.
All right, just to be clear.
I'm done.
Okay.
My 2 cents worth is, I'm going to piggyback on what Andrew said. I think having more parents possibly, bumping that to 5, and particularly 3 and 2, because there is a proportionate, would then bump it to 15. To me, that's another, it's another individual, give an opportunity for our community to be there, but I think we went 5 parents to get it to 15.
Cool.
3 and 2.
Great. We'll work with that, and then we'll come back after we talk through this. Now, here's what I would recommend in terms of membership selection.
Joanne, I'm sorry, before you go that, is the
Yes.
board okay with this 15? I want to, before we move forward, I
Please.
want to make sure that we've got the will of the board here.
I could go along with the 15 here. My only concern is, let's say we set up a listening session, and let's say with the parents, we have 5 parents there, and, you know, timing didn't work. Something else came up, calendar, and we didn't get a good representation at that listening session. I would hope that we'd say, hey, maybe we need to do another one, just to make sure that we hear all the voices.
Okay, so 2
And that's
opportunities for feedback on the first draft of the plan.
Because sometimes, or most of the time, most people don't think their voice is heard. And if we're gonna do this right, we want those voices heard.
Thank you.
Well, and part of that is also how we communicate, because part of feeling heard is not that we did what you said. Right? So, and this is overall different, so there's a difference between explaining why we decided not to do something, why we chose these things, is there will be choices made, and not everybody's preference will end up there, but explaining why and grounding it in, this is who we were trying to be, and this is where we were trying to go, so we decided to select these at this time. for this 5-year period of time, not for the millennium, is a good portion of that. Did I have the opportunity to become, I think that the more opportunities we can offer, as well as identifying if you did watch this on video, or if you were talking to your neighbor, who do you contact to say, I wanted to give some feedback, I'm gonna send an email, or identifying what that information path would be, so people know that they could send it to this board member, or send it to whomever, so that it gets to the committee.
Just in preparation of that feedback, understand that, you know, the strategic plan has these big vision stuff, and when you invite the feedback, you're gonna get feedback, right? But it's not always gonna be strategic. Like you're talking about, you know, student learning, and somebody says there's too much salt on the chicken nuggets. Okay, so not really strategic feedback, but you are gonna get that kind of stuff, and you're gonna have to separate that kind of thing. So strategic thinking isn't something that everybody does every day. So the feedback is not always gonna be at that level you're looking for. So just what it's worth.
So the will of the board?
I'm fine with 15.
Good.
Yep, okay, thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Terrific. So this is what I would anticipate, and again, you need to now weigh in on the second part, is how do we select membership? And I really think it should be an open invitation, so that next week you send out, and I've got the copy, I can get it to Ron, to both staff and to families, saying that we're forming, you know, we'll certainly launch the strategic planning process, and in the part, let people know that they'll have the opportunity for feedback this way and input, but we're forming the board is forming a strategic planning committee. This is the commitment. We are looking for people that would be able to make this commitment from now until roughly May of 2024 for roughly 2 meetings a month. This would be the task and the charge. And if you are interested, we have them contact by a certain date. And I would say probably by, you know, November 15th. And then we get that first meeting in place in November with that group. And we could even announce when the first meeting is, right in that communication, when the next two meetings are, so that they can see the commitment firsthand that way.
Andrew, to your point, you know, you're trying to invite the people that, if I can paraphrase, whine a lot about things to try to get them engaged in the whole system. So you may want to take this and edit the copy to try to, you know, invite those people without being too negative. So you get that engagement from those folks.
So in the copy, does it just say, yes, Susie's interested in being on the planning committee, or does Susie have to give why they're interested?
Oh, I think why is important.
Okay.
And what I've often done is, you know, how do you see yourself offering value to this process? So that people then are, you know, they can give both experience and their perspective.
Okay.
Because you get too many, you're gonna have to whittle down that makes it good.
Right.
For the 1 to 2 meetings per month, what is your average length of the meeting? And what is the average amount of time people generally need to prepare for that meeting?
It's a really good question, and I would say 2 hours. And there
2
are
hours per meeting?
2 hours for the meeting, and roughly, I mean, that's about 2 hours of prep.
Okay.
And some meetings will have more than that, and others will have none. As we begin, you know, some of the initial ones are more, very much, we're just looking at the data regarding vision and values. There's not much to prepare, to read and prep on that. But then as we get into the meat of it in the winter months, it is more. And so I think that that's fair to say that, you know, there will be preparation. We'll be really good at getting people things in advance, but it's not just that commitment, but it's about 2 hours a night. And then I like to look at your schedule of when you often have those. It's a 6:30 start, good 7. We don't need to decide that now, but, you know, what works well for your families in terms of that and your staff. Because I will say this though, you know, and that's one thing staff have to keep in mind. In all likelihood, these will be evening meetings. You know, because we're not going to be able to attract people if we did them at 3:30. So we need to, I mean, any staff member needs to know that commitment is a big one that way.
Well, I think that's the communication when we say, hey, we're looking for people, here's the commitments, and they are meetings, certainly, with all those other goals.
Other questions on this?
So once we have, again, let's say we have 20 parents, how do we want to select the committee? Say we have 4 board members.
Do they select the committee, or does it come back to all of us? I mean, do they do it as a third party?
What have you done in the past?
Yeah.
Done it both ways.
Yeah.
It's really, I think, what the board feels most comfortable with. Is it something you'd want to delegate, or is it something you feel it's important for you or administration to do?
There's pros and cons of each way.
Yes.
How was it done last time?
Last time it was an open invite, and we actually didn't have to, I don't think we had to eliminate anybody.
So
And that may happen. I mean, we may come back and say, okay, we have we have 7 families. I don't know if it would do more harm to whittle it down. I mean, I think we can cross that bridge when we come to it in terms of increasing membership.
Let's say we had 60 parents respond. Myself personally, I would lean on the both of you to at least whittle it down and make a recommendation.
If you get 60 people, 60 families willing to put in 2 nights a week or 2 hours a week, I would first celebrate that, okay, because that's a big deal. But yeah, we can handle, with the responses that they'll provide, we can handle.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's
So
something you
We'll
guys
make
have done in the
we'll
past.
make a recommendation.
We could also look at the information from the beginning from them. We have the why you want to be on, but I also look for a breadth of experience in the district. So for the 3 from the primaries, if, depending who's asking, if there is breadth between some who have older primary and some who have younger primary, having each of those voices, because that's their current reality. And the younger primary is going to be in the system along as the older primary has experience in the system. That would help me
Yeah.
think about, help us, or think about how to get good breadth of experience and interest, so we have more types of voices on in the community process.
So what I'm hearing is Brian and Joanne will make a recommendation to us, and I'm hearing too, a wide representation when whittling it down. I think, Rebecca, to your point, we don't need 2 4th grade parents, for instance. If you have a 4th grade and a 1st grade, there could be a differential there, whatever it might be.
It is in part, and you're there for the community, but you are also thinking from your perspective and your involvement is that, so if you are a kindergarten parent, you're looking at another 7 years in the district. If you are an 8th grade parent, you're looking for the good of the district, but that doesn't necessarily mean, you may bring a different perspective because of that. You have
Yeah, it's just a wide variety of experiences. Yeah.
You get a lot less volunteers from the people who are only here for another 6 months. You know? Yeah.
I think the piece where we'll need some support, and I can draft an email that you can use, and it's for community members. You may need to do a separate email just to people you know without the students in school asking for that participation. It may be difficult to attain to community members without really beating the band and making sure. So my pledge to you is, just like we'll get copied to you for an email for families and staff, we'll do a separate one for community members, but you need to find that list of who you want to reach, and that may take some phone calls and just some different pieces around that. Because there isn't a list to contact these people. It's a little bit harder to get a hold of people in that frame.
Would the village and the town let us put a blurb in
Yeah.
their newsletters?
Yeah, there'll be a big communication factor. And then I think the other communication factor is just to let our families know, hey, we're looking for people who don't have children. And if they're interested, direct them to the right places if that's, again, because they're some of our best recruiters too as well. Just to kind of continue to share the word, a neighbor.
And there's some community groups that might be engaged with this district. For us, it's Rotary and Kiwanis was kind of a touch point for us because they were always, providing funding or, doing some kind of community service for us. So there'd be people there that touch on.
All right, what's next?
No?
Believe it or not,
Yeah.
answering your questions. Other questions? So are you comfortable in terms of membership? So what's going to occur is, by Monday, I will get to Ron a good packet with just communication to begin this process. Something that can go on the website, something that can be sent out to staff and families, and then copy that can also be used to get community membership. In that, we'll launch the process, but we will do a good job of talking about the strategic planning committee and the membership and the commitment that it is. We'll have a form that people would fill out. How you deploy that is up to you. And then we will move forward that way. Like I say, we'll announce the first 2 meetings and make sure that we get it that way. So we'll get moving that way. Do you have any questions or concerns as we sit right now?
Do we need to talk about membership, or will you also recommend board member membership? Is that something we should be discussing?
I think you will need to discuss it. If you choose to do it now, that's fine, or if you need to get going and you want to do it before November 15th or so, how do you want to structure that? What would be the best way to serve the board's needs that way?
Do you want to do it at an open meeting? Do you want to do it just, leave that to the board about how you want to whittle that down?
If our next open meeting presumably will be after the first time.
It could be November 13th. We could put that on as an agenda item at the
Because we
same
have-
time as we do the board self-evaluation,
Evaluation that night.
if you wanted to.
Can we just make,
I think in the policy, it said that it's the only item on
what was the question? I didn't hear it.
The question was, does the meeting itself for the board self-evaluation have to be a standing meeting only? I'll take a look.
there. For some reason,
If it is, we adjourn and then we come back into
Yeah.
another meeting. If the board is good with having another agenda item on that day.
Are the 4 of us all interested in being on the committee?
I am.
I was gonna nominate you and Rebecca.
That way we avoid rock, paper, scissors, I guess.
Right, well, this is a committee and every year, very different thing.
Well, and if it's a committee, does it need to run through a board meeting
Yes.
like our other committees?
I would recommend it run
That-
through,
That answers
Yes.
that other question.
13th.
I would recommend that.
13th it is.
There we go.
Okay.
Everybody gets time to sleep on it.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate
everybody's
you.
talking to
Can we
Are
get
we
a
talking
So we
circles?
gotta close the
motion
meeting
to
out.
adjourn?
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, be
Thank you.
Thank you.